Hello, everyone. Welcome back to I See What You're Saying, the Disciplined Listening Podcast. I'm Michael Reddington, and today it is my pleasure to welcome our next guest, Dayna Adelman. Dayna has led a very successful business communications career while working on 4 separate continents, often as the youngest person and only woman in the room. And her experiences along the way led her to write her first book, The Youngest One in the Room, which allows her to share her leadership lessons, experiences, ups and downs, and growth opportunities so that way we can all benefit from them as well. And I'm really excited to share this conversation with you today as she dives much deeper into her career, her family influences, how she got started, the lessons she learned, difficulties she had to overcome, opportunities she created, and some very important lessons that we can all apply no matter where we are in our career arc. One of the things she said right away that captured my attention was we must listen louder than we speak. She also talked about how we can find our voice in silence, and she dove deep into how she worked to develop self-awareness, how she worked to develop confidence, and so many more great stories and lessons that we can all learn from as well. And thank you all for being here for another episode. We really appreciate it. While you're here, please take a quick minute. Just like the show, share the show. Please leave us your feedback and comments. Subscribe to it, of course, so you know when the next episode comes out. Thank you for being here once again for another week. And also, please don't hesitate to check out our sponsors. Head over to humantel.com and enter the code INQUASIVE25 for 25% off their best-in-class online training to identify when somebody's emotions are changing by recognizing shifts in their facial expression and nonverbal communication. The professional interviewers can also head over to certifiedinterviewer.com to get all of their questions answered on both the International Association of Interviewers and the Certified Forensic Interviewer designation. And finally, while you're online, please check out unquasive.com to learn more about the programs our clients ask us to custom facilitate for their senior leaders, sales teams, HR teams, and more when they are looking to learn how to apply the strategic observation and persuasive communication skills necessary to unlock hidden value in every conversation. We really do appreciate you being here week after week. Thank you so very much. So now, without further ado, Dayna Adelman. Good morning, Dayna. It is great to meet you. Thank you for being here today. How are you?
I'm doing really good. Thank you so much, Michael, for having me on. Good to be here.
It's my pleasure. I'm really excited for this conversation. For me, one of the goals putting this whole thing together was how many different perspectives on communication can we compile in one place to help people, no matter where they are professionally or personally, continue to grow and evolve with how they listen and how they communicate. And the title of your book got me right away. The youngest person in the room.
Yes.
For those of us that do any type of, whether it's in-house or on a consulting basis, leadership training, mentoring, developing, we're constantly working with people at different levels in their career. And sometimes it's people earlier in their career trying to figure out how to manage up or earn credibility or earn buy-in. And sometimes it's people who've been in a little bit longer who are trying to remember how to work with people that are just coming up in their career. So I'm excited for this conversation. I think it's lots and great. So if I may start by asking, as you were the youngest person in the room, building an amazing career, how did you earn your voice at the table?
Well, that is a fantastic question, and one I could probably spend the whole hour talking about, but I'll try to keep it succinct so we can talk about many things over the next few minutes. But I talk about it in the book. It's early on, day 2 of my professional career. All of a sudden, I find myself at the big old school conference table. We had the most senior client come in. I was working at a consultancy at the time. And again, day 2, he sits down next to me. So I'm sweating and, I shouldn't even be there in my mind. I'm a little more than an intern at this point. And he turns to me to start the whole kickoff of introductions and says, who are you and what do you do? And I like to think I said something very smart and eloquent, but it was word vomit at that point in time. And I think that's when I realized, okay, after that moment, I had to listen, way louder than I spoke in that meeting and in many of the meetings that would come after that when I was early in career. And that doesn't mean don't speak at all. It means being intentional with your listening so you can figure out, first of all, why you're there, because sometimes you don't know why you're in the room when you're that young. Someone's giving you this amazing opportunity, but you don't know what to do with it. You don't know how you're going to contribute, so maybe you can't prepare for it. So listening is the best way, and finding some kind of nugget of information that you can build on or you can relate to, and finding your voice through the silence. I think that was a very, very first pivotal lesson that I learned early on.
I love both of those lines. Listen louder than you talk. That's a fantastic line. And find your voice through the silence. I think that's a great way to look at it. I'm going to make it about my family for half a second. My dad used to say, let the conversation come to you. Like the more you pay attention to what's happening around you, the more you can find the best way to fit in. And I think for all of us, certainly myself included, and it still happens, I find myself in conversations where it's like, well, I'm supposed to be smart. Like I'm supposed to be involved. I'm supposed to have an idea. So I better start talking. Well, actually, if other people lead themselves to the right idea and I'm happen to be sitting in the room, that could be the best of all conclusions.
Yeah, I fully agree. And I think as a communicator, you can wear many hats and at many different points in time. Sometimes you might have to be the big idea generator, so always be prepared to do that. But sometimes you're more of the convener of the idea, right? Like you are pulling the different voices together, synthesizing the information, and creating something that maybe these people around you couldn't have done on their own, but they're the ones who actually said it. And I think that is a super powerful role to play. And that's something you can play whether you are day 2 in your career or you've been in the hot seat for many, many years. And that takes listening.
It does. And it's such a tremendous way to look at it. Be the convener of ideas. I don't need to be the one that walks in here and has the solution.
No.
But if I listen enough and start picking up the pieces, it's one of the ways that we like to talk about it is like collecting puzzle pieces without knowing what the final picture is going to be.
Exactly.
If I connect enough pieces, the picture will eventually reveal itself. And now if I present the picture as others created it, we all arrived at this together. In a funny way, people are like, oh, how did you see that? How did you hear that? How did you pick up on that? Well, if I was the only person in the room listening, y'all brought it to me.
Exactly. And that's the magic and the beauty of being a communications professional. And a lot of what I write about in this first book, The Youngest One in the Room, it's the first 10 years of my career. So it's all of those lessons learned. And I'm going to be completely honest, in the moment, I didn't know I was learning those lessons. It was only, years later upon deep reflection, even when I sat down to write some of the stories in the book, and I was for the first time realizing the actual significance of what I had learned. So it was actually a complete joy to put it on paper and to share the learnings with the world. A lot of them hinge on listening, just being present.
And speaking of listening, I picked up that you said your first book, so we're going to have to keep these conversations going.
We're going to have to keep it going.
Your second and 12th book or however many come out.
Exactly.
So as you were writing the book, and I'm making some assumptions here, so please correct me everywhere I screw this up. As you're writing the book, maybe putting the outline together, maybe even like mid-chapter, and stories and examples start flowing out. Oh, I remember this, or this happened, or now that I think about where I am today, it actually came from this conversation. What were maybe one or two of the most surprising lessons that you learned upon reflection of your first 10 years?
Oh, that is also a fantastic question. I think there were many things. I think understanding my past to understand my present was really key. So some of the themes that were coming up and emerging in those early years, I was actually starting to tie them back to my childhood. So for example, there's a story in there that might seem random on the surface that I talk about going back to, I think it was like 10th or 11th grade chemistry class. And having this teacher at the time who used to say over and over, just do the work, just do the work. And I didn't know what he meant at the time. And then flash forward to my career and many situations where I find myself going, just do the work, just do the work. And again, that's going to mean something different to everyone, but it was almost this, I don't even know how to describe it, like this outer body experience to like a deja vu moment, if you will, to go back in time and then put the pieces together and figure out what does that mean to me now. And that's been a mantra that propels me forward. And for me personally, it means show up, do all that you can. It doesn't mean over prepare. It doesn't mean drive yourself crazy. It means do enough to know what you need to do. Take the tools that you have at your fingertips, and then to be able to run with it. So that was definitely one of them. And then let's see, a few others. I would say understanding when I've taken on too much and I've dug myself into my own hole. And that was a theme that kept coming up. It was like, no, it wasn't the company's fault. It wasn't my boss's fault. I was the one who had the big vision and, I wanted to make it happen. And so in doing so, I created my own worst enemy by, working around the clock, making things bigger and more complicated than they had to be, just because I was so tunnel vision towards, a shiny light that would have been just as shiny had I reeled it back a little bit and just kept it simple. So that for sure was a big eye opener, and something that now moving forward, since unlocking that learning, I have tried so hard to just keep it simple.
Great. Yeah, keep it simple.
Yeah.
And I think both of those answers, as you went through them, bring up a level of self-awareness and self-reflection that, from one man's point of view, I don't think are very common, especially if we get back to the youngest one in the room theme, from people who might be in the earlier stages of their career. So thinking back to what as soon as you said chemistry in high school, I started shivering, by the way.
Exactly.
So thank you for putting me through
Everyone has, well, not everyone, but a lot of people, communications people in particular, have that reaction.
Yeah. If I have to look at the periodic table one more time, this isn't going to go well for any of us. But that level of kind of insight, it's what you were talking about earlier. If I pay attention to enough of what's going on, eventually the dots will connect themselves. And that's not just true in one meeting, it's true over a longer time span. And that's a great illustration. But then even stepping back and saying, it's not the company's fault that I'm in this hole. It's not the company's fault that I'm doing this. I think even for people longer in their career, just because of how our brains are wired, it's easier to blame other people, other forces, than it is to take responsibility for ourselves. And that doesn't make us bad people. It's just kind of how we operate. But especially early in your career, how did you learn to develop that skill of self-awareness or that self-recognition when it would have been easier just to blame it on the company instead of internalizing it and look for ways to improve?
That was a really hard one, because I will 100% now in retrospect say I lacked self-awareness in some instances very early on in my career. I do think self-awareness is something that has to be learned. It comes with time, but it also comes when you have the right mentors, managers, finding the right way to point it out to you. And I think I'm really lucky in that I had so many of those in my journey, wonderful people who were able to give feedback, whether it was in, a formal setting or just as a friend on the side, and bring that awareness to my attention. And I would say that probably, I don't know, maybe the first 5 to 7 years, it's not that I was unaware. It just, I wasn't so in tune to what I am today. And that continues to evolve as well as I go. So I think, it's a combination of learning about self-awareness in the workplace, but also having people give you really direct, honest feedback to bring that awareness to your attention that you might not pick up on otherwise.
All great points. And from the outside looking in, it might be easier to say, well, people who are earlier in their career might lack self-awareness because, to sort of paraphrase from you, they don't have the experience, they don't have the time and seat, they haven't been in these meetings, in these situations before. So for someone to wrap their arm around them and say, hey, you might want to think about this or do that. Okay. we all know people who are veterans and
Yeah.
completely lack self-awareness
Yep.
for how they speak, they behave, they work, their expectations, how it not only reflects on themselves, but impacts people around them. So it's not a need that is unique to people who are younger in their career as
No.
well. And I'm going to ask this next question. You already kind of answered it a little bit in jest because one man's opinion. Again, I feel like the people who probably need to develop self-awareness the most are the ones who are least aware and
Yes.
open to it to begin with. So we might
Yeah.
be kind of spitting in the wind a little bit with this one here, but just for entertainment's sake, for people who are looking to develop the skill of self-awareness, you talked about mentors and getting direct feedback. So I guess it's not a very well articulated question, but to ask it in two parts. One would be, how do you go about getting that feedback or getting those mentors? But maybe the most important part of the question is, how do you navigate the emotional roller coaster of getting feedback that might not feel so great up front?
Great questions. So I'm going to take the first part first, because it's
Thank
a
you.
little bit easier to me to answer at least. But in terms of how do you go about getting that mentor, so your direct line manager is not always going to be the best manager. It just is what it is. It's a crapshoot out there. So you can't rely on that person to, be the most eloquent or well-spoken or, best packaged when it comes to giving feedback. So if you feel like you're not getting that from your direct manager, you can always ask to those who are adjacent to you, who you work with as well. I would recommend, if you work in a situation where hierarchy is very important, because that unfortunately is the case in some places, maybe run it by your manager and just say, hey, I'm going to ask so-and-so, I've worked on a project with them. So try to get it from as many sources as you can. And then if you're really not getting what you need from your manager, ask. Just continue to ask, because it might be a lack of self-awareness on their part that they're not giving you what you need. All that to say, that's in the box of, direct manager feedback. Finding a mentor, I think, is super important. And I've had some really good mentors in my career, and they shouldn't be someone who's going to just tell you you're wonderful. It should be someone who has lived life, they've had experiences. You want to seek them out for a particular reason. Maybe you like their leadership style, or there's something you think you can learn from them. Whatever that reason might be, find someone who is not going to just pat you on the back. Find someone who's going to be direct, who can role play with you if you need it, who can give you suggestions on how to navigate, certain areas or topics, or who you feel comfortable asking hard questions to. And that person could be a good source for you to role play before you have the conversation with a direct manager. And this could go to when you become a manager as well. Let's say you're a first-time manager, you don't know how to give feedback. Can you practice with that mentor? Can you practice with someone who you feel comfortable with as well? So that would be part one of the question. And just to add on to that, it doesn't always have to come from within your workplace. There can be many types of mentors who come from, maybe it's someone you encountered in an adjacent industry or at a conference or previous job, whoever that might be. Just make sure you have that person to help guide, coach, and ask your questions to. That's on the mentor front. The second part of the question, so a little bit more challenging. Let's see if I was listening and I actually get this right, because I
Well,
went
I
off course
botched
with
the
the
question
first
to
one.
begin with, so don't worry about it.
All good. But I think in terms of developing that self-awareness, right? It takes one to know one is the common saying here. So more often than not, it is going to come from the outside, that someone is going to mention something, and then, you might feel like you've been hit over the head because it was unexpected. How do you deal with that? You take a deep breath. If you get emotional, That's okay. It could happen. It's happened to me. It's happened to other people. Sometimes when it comes out of left field as well, it does feel like you've been blindsided. I always say, try to take a breath before responding. You're 9 times out of 10 going to be defensive in those moments, especially if you were taken for a loop. So take a breath, thank the person for the feedback, and take time to internalize it. So maybe after that meeting, if it's in person, maybe then you go for a walk, leave the office, clear your head, go home, sleep on it. Don't do anything right away because you have not processed that feedback yet. And you might wake up the next morning and go, you know what? I don't necessarily like how that was delivered to me, but that person's right. Or I don't like how that was delivered and I don't agree. That happens, but I slept on it and I do want to have a follow-up conversation to ask more questions and just understand that person's perspective. So deep breaths, go for a walk, sleep on it, and always thank the person for the feedback because feedback is a gift. Whether you like it or not, it's a gift. And maybe in 10 years, you'll understand what it meant. And in the moment, it burns. But in the long run, it usually is going to serve you if you take it, internalize it, and then figure out what you need to do with it.
I love all of that. Sometimes I feel like the best answer in the most stressful moments is simply thank you. And then just let it go. Like for somebody who teaches communication for a living, I found myself plenty of times where I have no idea what to say.
Yeah.
or realizing what I want to say is going to be entirely unproductive.
Yeah.
So just thank you and let it go. That's a great way. Take time, let it process it. Once upon a time, I met a guy who I cannot remember his name at a bar in Gainesville, Florida, who said, how do you say it? Listen to me now, hear me later.
Yeah.
Like take the time to process it, let it set in. So important. Because oftentimes the feedback that this probably isn't the best way to say it, hurts the most, ends up being the most important. Like the reason why it hurts is because there's some truth in there, and that truth is probably hitting close to your self-image, and that's why the change is so necessary. So I thought the way that you walked through that was great.
Thank you. Yeah.
I feel like I gotta stop saying I feel like, and I think, by the way.
You know what's so funny? In having these conversations and speaking to other communicators, we all do it. We all make the mistakes that we tell other people not to do. So I feel you. I'm going to listen back to this, I'm sure, and just want to slap myself across the face. But hey, we're humans, so.
All the time. It was probably
good.
a week ago, maybe 2. I was talking to a group because one person kept saying, I think.
Yep.
I was like, well, you realize when you do that, you're prioritizing yourself over everybody else and you're taking away their opportunity. And here I am, I've probably done it 10 times in the first 20 minutes. So my apologies.
It is your podcast though. So different situation. You can do it.
Appreciate you giving me a little slack on that one.
Of course.
I feel like I just did it again, whatever, we're rolling. Confidence plays a big role in the ability to internalize feedback, to be able to roll with feedback, and also the ability to interject ourselves professionally in these meetings and in these conversations, be it internally or externally with clients. You talked about like on your second day being in a big meeting with the client thinking, oh, this is cool. What am I doing here? As you reflected upon your journey, were there any aha moments about how you developed your sense of confidence that other people can draw from as well?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It is hard sometimes to bring the confidence when you don't have it in you, right? You don't wake up every day, or not everyone wakes up every day. I'm wonderful, I'm great, I'm here for a reason. However, those are the moments when you need to actually tap into yourself. You got hired for a reason, right? There are a lot of people out there who are interviewing for any given job nowadays. If you look on LinkedIn alone, it says, X hundred thousands of people applied for this job. So if you are entering a room, you were hired for a reason. Always keep that in mind. That's your base, and that's a really, really strong starting point. Now, you might enter the room and you might not know why you're there. You might not know what, if anything, you'll have to say. But again, that's okay. And I take this advice from my grandfather, who has since passed. He was such a wise man, such a gentleman, and he was the quietest one in the room. He rarely spoke, yet when he did, he made the most impact. And we all looked up to him because of it. And I remember when he passed, during the eulogies, that came up so many times, right? He wasn't the loudest voice. He didn't always have the words, but when he did, he made the most impact. And I think if you can go into a room knowing you're there for a reason, and I don't necessarily have to say the most amount of, I don't have to say the most amount in this room, but I'm either going to figure it out in this room or I'll figure it out after, and maybe my impact will come after. That should always be your baseline going in. And if that can be your baseline, that already should bump your confidence up. Now, sometimes you're going to enter a room and you're going to know you're the expert. You're going to know, you're going to have more confidence. And I think actually in those instances, it gets more interesting, because then you start to forget. You forget to listen. You want to get your word in. You're talking over people. You're on fire. But think about also in those situations how that might be perceived, and how you're not giving space to someone in the room who might not have the confidence that you have on that given day. So I think it works on both ends of the spectrum, right? And we've all been in those moments where we are coming from a place of low confidence or high confidence. So how do you show up in the middle without walking away from who you are and what you have to offer? And that takes listening, again, just feeling the room, reading off the room. And that is a communication skill that, even if you're the youngest, you can still have that. Yes, it gets refined over time, but on day one, if you have that in the back of your mind, you'll be good. You'll be golden.
Agreed. And I wish I had a chance to have a conversation with your grandfather at some point.
Yeah,
learn from his wisdom.
He was a good one. Yes, thank you.
Sometimes confidence can be reflected in silence, which is a theme that you brought up previously.
Yep.
Not forcing the interjection, not feeling compelled to say something. Let other people unwind the rope in front of us before we decide where to grab it and where to pull on it. And in a lot of ways, technical experts become the worst listeners because the expertise, the confidence, the familiarity, I'll just give it to you. You can't teach me anything. And when I give it to you, even though it's new to you, I know it so well, I'm going to say it in a way that is only going to be more confusing. Silly example of a young son, and the way they taught him to tie his shoes at school, it works for kids, but it's not going to work in real life. We're going to have to change this. Yeah. And so finally we got to a point where Gabe was willing to listen to Dad about tying your shoes differently. How many times a day do I tie my shoes?
Yeah.
Half a dozen?
You know what you're doing.
Anyway, right? For 40 years, give or take.
Yep.
So when I was trying to teach him how to tie, it just got to the one point where you cross one loop under the other. I was like, how do I articulate this?
Yeah.
I do it so many times, but how do I say this in a way so my son understands it? And a lot of times when we are so confident, we blow through that stage and we talk in a way where it makes sense to us, but it doesn't make sense to the other person. And then we get frustrated because they don't get it, but they don't get it based on how we explained it.
Absolutely.
So from your perspective, as somebody who I have no doubt, just based on what I learned about your career before the conversation, you found yourself in conversations where you were supremely confident. How did you learn to condition yourself to let the conversation happen around you as opposed to dominating it?
Yeah, that was a learning I cannot take credit for all on my own. That was feedback that had been given to me over the years. And it's funny because sometimes it would be dialed up depending on what my role was. And sometimes I would get the opposite feedback depending on what my role was. So I think there was a really juicy period of time, really, I would say between my 3rd to 7th or 8th year working, where it was such a roller coaster, up and down, up and down. So came from the feedback. It came from a little bit of realizing myself, being super dominant. in this manner is not going to get the results that's required in this dynamic. The other thing that helped for me personally, I did a few stints of working overseas. So then you have that extra layer of cultural difference and challenge. And working in an environment where, let's say, English is still the business language, but there's a difference between common English and fancy English, right? And so how do I not dumb myself down by any means, because I was working with very, very brilliant people, but be more intentional with my word choice so that I wasn't causing unnecessary confusion based on the words I was using, because they might just not be as common to someone who doesn't, speak naturally. So that was a little bit of trial and error, and just experience and learning how to dial it up or down depending on the situation. If I go back to some of the earlier days when I was in the US, so you take the overseas cultural differences out of question. Yeah, I think really, again, it was trial and error. At one point in time, and I write about this in the book, one manager went on to describe me as something called the velvet hammer, which I didn't know at the time what that meant. So I went and Googled it, and the first definition that came up was the Urban Dictionary definition, which always is just like it's a riot, whatever is in there. And for those listening who might not know it, velvet hammer means, in the simplest way to describe it, or how I now like to describe it, it's someone who is very they get what they want in the end, but they do it in a way in which, I'm not going to use the word manipulation, but whatever is by any means necessary. And a lot of times that's what we were saying earlier, taking other people's ideas and just packaging it up together to ultimately get to what you were driving at to begin with, but making other people feel like, oh, either it was their idea or they had something to do with it. And I think that's a learned skill just over time. It's a little bit of style and, again, trial and error.
Trial and error is a great way to, in my opinion, here we go again, to build confidence, because in a lot of ways, confidence comes from the problems that we create and survive. Yes. So I made a mistake. I survived it. I learned from it. Not only did I learn from it and I can do better next time, but I won't be scared when I'm in a similar situation, because the last one didn't kill me. Yep. So I'll be able to work myself to the next one. So that trial and error, sometimes it's a bumpy ride, but it's another great way to build confidence. And your comments about intentional word choice are so important, both domestically and abroad. It's difficult not to talk over or under somebody, really maintain that credible level of dialogue as we go through. And when we talk about working overseas, let's remind people, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but we're not talking like you just went to London. You were in Indonesia.
No, I was in Indonesia. Yeah. So
other side of the world, totally different culture and situation, which we'll get back to for sure before this conversation is over. So when we talk about cultural differences, they were pretty significant. It's not like you were right next door. You took your travels far and wide as you were building your career. But to get back to this piece of credibility, word choice can have a lot to do with it. Sometimes just the right word at the right time can be enough to trip somebody's, oh, she's credible, she gets it. Okay. I feel like when I look back on mistakes that I made, if I was dominating a room or dominating a conversation and either realized it or someone was nice enough to tell me about it, there's plenty of examples where none of those happened. But it was less, although there were instances for sure where it's because I did have the expertise or the confidence and it was well-intentioned, but I dominated it anyway. I feel like if I was to be painfully honest about it, there were more times when I dominated a room because I didn't have the expertise, I didn't have the confidence. And I was trying to come off as something that I wasn't, or trying to keep the conversation away from someplace that I didn't want to go. And so it was really that lack of confidence or that lack of ego strength that led me to come off in a way that might have been overconfident or dominating, arrogant, and any other negative phrase that we want to put on it. As you reflect back in your career, and some of that, by the way, I'm going to steal from you for a second,
please,
was because I was often young. Like when I got hired by the interrogation company, I was 29 years old. So I'm finding myself in rooms with seasoned federal investigators, and I'm the guy sitting in front of the room, to your point, going, well, I think I'm here for a reason.
Right. And why am I here?
had to work through it. So whether it's because I perceived myself as young or from a different background or from whatever it was. As you look back on your career, especially these first 10 years as the youngest one in the room, trying to work that title of your book in as often as I can.
Thank you. I appreciate it. You're doing great.
As you were working through that, were there times where you noticed that you were trying to overcome similar things, whether it was because of your age? And please forgive me for saying this, but my wife and I talk about this a lot. Maybe it's being the
Gender.
woman in the room, being the
Yep.
American in the room, being the youngest person in the room, whatever it is. And when you found yourselves in those situations, besides just experience, how did you learn to really center yourself so you could maximize your contributions because you were there for a reason?
Yeah. It wasn't always easy, and all of those things have happened. I worked many years not only overseas but in a very male-dominated industry traditionally, and I was very often the only female, the only American, the only native English speaker, the only, and the youngest on top of all of that. And so it can be quite intimidating, when you are, first of all, you're representing your kind, and you're sitting in a room where everyone's in a dark colored suit and they have maybe 20 or 30 years on you. And I just feel like all eyes are staring you down. And that is enough to make someone want to run out the other way. So underneath my suit or my jacket or whatever was on that day, even though I was maybe physically sweating, I was trying to just walk through in my head, what did I have to bring to the table? And I did get to a point over time where if I was going to be in a meeting like that, those were the meetings where I probably prepared more than necessary because I felt like I had to. You'll know what's right for you. There were some meetings I underprepared because I had more confidence and was like, I can wing it. But especially in those early days, I did over prepare. I knew my talking points. I knew what I wanted to get across. So I did go into those meetings with a little bit of a pre-planned agenda. But then it had to be about how do you navigate the conversation to get your points in and have your voice be heard. Because you can't just come in and bang, 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 get them out, and then you sit back for the rest of the meeting. It has to be natural. So I guess my piece of advice in that would be if you do prepare, you still need to listen because you need to find the right moment to insert your voice. So it feels like you're part of the conversation instead of only there to drop your mic and then, walk away. That doesn't come off as well either. So preparation, I would say, was number one. And then number two, putting preparation to good use in the moment.
All great points. Be part of the conversation. Don't just drop the mic. That's a great part. The preparation is key. Often those who can control the most variables are the ones who will be as successful as possible in the conversation or more successful in the conversation. And that preparation allows us to listen.
Yep.
If we're not prepared, how am I going to react? What are they going to say? Yep. What might they go? Am I going to be ready? Is this going to work? The more prepared we are, the more all those brains conversations can get shut down. And for me, I have limited amount of still functioning brain cells. Now I can focus them on what's happening in front of me to be part of the conversation as opposed to just dropping the mic. And you talked about navigating conversations. And in preparation for the conversation, I learned that you're a big fan of storytelling.
I am. I love telling stories.
So how do you use storytelling to help navigate conversations?
So for me, it's not just about what's the point that I want to make. It's about how do I shape the story. And this isn't going to work for everyone because not everyone is a storyteller. So I think you need to find what's right for you and then wrap it under that umbrella. So let's see, I'm going to come up with an example on the spot. Let's say the case is, you're meeting with a client, you're trying to explain to them why they should go left when they're currently going right. One thing that I love to do, and I've done this before, is you actually have people come into the room and you ask them to close their eyes and you tell them to, right now we're over here on the right, but close your eyes, imagine this, and you paint the picture for them. You actually put them on the left. It doesn't always work, but it provides that color, and it takes people along on a journey with you. And it helps them. Some people can visualize in different ways. So it helps those, visual learners maybe understand versus just saying, okay, I'm here today to tell you we're going to do this because I said so. So give it more of and when I was writing the book, my editors actually helped me because I thought I was good at this, and then they helped me take it to the next level. But who was there? What did it look like? What did it smell like? And obviously this was for purposes of the book, but how can you bring some of that into your day-to-day, into the boardroom, into your Zoom meeting? Because a lot of people lose the sight of the conversation. They'll zone out if they're not in it, right? So it's your job as the presenter to keep them in it. And how do you do that? For me, it's through vivid storytelling.
Your job to keep people in the conversation. Amen. Yeah. If we're getting frustrated because somebody else is zoned out, because somebody else missed the point, because somebody else didn't pay attention, because somebody else, well, who's the lowest common denominator? We're the one leading the dance right now. It's on us to keep them involved, to keep them focused, to keep them with us. Another fantastic point. You use the word journey in there. Mm-hmm. And again, correct me everywhere I stray from the path on this, please. It might be tempting to walk into any room, internal with your own company, external with clients, and say, here's where we are now. We're going to go over here instead. And these are all the logical, rational reasons why this is better. And generally, those logical, rational reasons are met with immediate resistance. Even if factually and objectively, they're all accurate, they're going to be met with resistance. If we can help people understand or even experience some of the journey from what it's going to take from where we are to where we're going to go, what the outcome will be like, all the emotions, all these other things. I feel like not only does it help them change their outlook or how that initial level of resistance that we might have otherwise encountered, but it creates a greater level of engagement, more informed questions, more outcome. How have you seen with your process, and you are a communications professional, so getting people to experience things through stories and getting customers to change their purchasing habits and all of these things, this is what you do. So how have you seen that journey impact people's decision-making and openness to change?
I think you always have to start with why. I've found that when you just tell people we're going to go on this journey, trust me, come with me, we're here, we're going to go here. Okay. But why? So when you're painting that picture, you have to embed the why, and it has to be super clear. And it has to give people a reason to come with you versus just the trust because you're telling me this is what we should be doing. And I often find the number one reason why a change management project fails or you get a lot of resistance is because people don't understand why. You didn't tell them, and that was your job to tell them. And that could be done in many different ways. Maybe you have hard data, and this is what the data says, this is what we need to do. Or maybe you don't have data, and you have to get a little bit more creative. But if you are going to embark on it doesn't even have to be a massive change management or transformation program, but something where you're trying to take people from A to B, you better explain why B is necessary and show them why A is no longer viable. So definitely always start with why and get creative with how you share that why with them.
That creativity piece I want to come back to in just a second.
Yeah.
We can tie this into even the previous conversation about feedback. Feedback is a change management process.
Yep.
Mike, you're currently behaving this way. That's really unfortunate. This is the way you need to behave. Probably not the best. Well, depending on who you are, you can tell it to me like that and I'll be totally fine with it. But generally speaking, probably not the best way to do it more often than not. It could be internal. Here's software migration or a new process, whatever. Could certainly be external. Here's a new marketing process. Here's how we're going to change whatever it is that we're doing for the client. But all of that, working with the why, are understanding the outcomes, the new destination, an important part of the why? So it's not just we're doing this to be more profitable. We're doing this to build your leadership skills. We're doing this to build your reputation, your brand.
Yep.
But it's all true, but it's also a bit nebulous.
Right.
If helping people understand the outcome is important, how have you learned to wrap people's brains around the outcome as part of the why in order to earn that trust and buy-in?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and again, it depends on the audience and what you're going for, but I think one of the best ways to get people to come along with you is to paint the picture of what it will look like if they don't. And one case study that I love, and this is kind of like, a knock on our old Blackberries, but like, who has a Blackberry today, right? No one. They didn't evolve. They didn't stay relevant. And their lunch was totally eaten by the iPhone. And now look what the market looks like today. So if you can take an example that might have nothing to do with what you're trying to do in the moment, but it's the harsh reality of like, hey, look, guys, if we don't do this, we will be like that. That I find is a very, very powerful tactic to get people to see the bigger picture and to understand what's at stake if the change doesn't happen. That's maybe a little bit drastic, but it works.
I mean, it's been well documented that often as people, we're more motivated by fear of loss than the possibility of gain. So, and you've said it multiple times, it's always true. It depends on your audience and your goal and your context of the situation and all these things. That's why having such a deep toolbox is so important. But a very real tool to use is that fear button. And we don't want to push it too much or too many times, because then it just becomes, the carrot
without the stick. It's a reality check.
Yeah. But the reality check, I think, is a great way to say it. And another quick shout out to my dad, who, when I got my first cell phone, I was the second to last one of my friends. Nobody cares about this. I was my second to last friend to get a cell phone, because I was just resistant, which I probably am still too resistant in my life. And it was one of those, like, it was basically a mini phone. Like, it had the full keypad on it, the little antenna on the top. And I brought it home. And my dad, who worked in the computer industry at the time, looked at me and he said, "You know what, Michael, that looks like a telephone now, but in the very near future, cell phones are going to be a computer in your pocket." And of course, my response in 1990, whatever that was, said, yeah, sure, Dad, whatever. And now here we are. We all have computers in our pocket that are infinitely more capable than the computers we knew at the time.
Oh, totally. And listening to us, and they're probably going to serve us the same ad later today. But
no doubt.
A whole conversation for another day.
I'm going to get something that says, "Remember BlackBerry?" Like,
exactly.
Or if the AI is really not paying attention, I'm going to get an advertisement for the fruit.
Because
they think that's what I really want.
Exactly. That's so
with
funny.
AI. I was working with a client not too long ago that was looking for, he runs an enormous landscaping business in Florida, like really across most of the state. And he placed an I won't say the name of the online platform, but he placed an advertisement for people to work in the nursery.
Okay.
And of course, it started feeding him resumes for people that work with babies, not people who work with plants. So
that's hilarious.
Yeah, these things never cease to entertain me.
No, but just a quick follow up on that one. You, as the listening expert, could have so many interesting conversations, because you have to really teach this technology how to listen and take in what you're saying. But also, it takes good prompts and, Anyway, side conversation for another day.
It is, and probably a never-ending one. But a very good friend of mine, who's one of the premier forensic linguists in the world, going back probably 15 years, we used to have this conversation, because she would do all kinds of statement analysis and different things. But the semantics and the context are so important. I could say, "You're killing me," and it could mean you're telling me the funniest joke I've heard all year, or you're literally my throat.
Right, exactly.
One of those things.
Yeah.
The situation really matters. And thank you for not sticking a knife in my throat.
There's a screen between us. No, just kidding.
Yes, that's helpful for now.
Just kidding.
I'm glad you've at least thought about it, I guess. But I think that semantics conversation leads back into some of the cultural differences that you experience. So again, to highlight, and I'm not putting down, I know we have listeners in England, and thank you all, but to go from the United States to England, there's some big differences, but there's enough similarities there that we can all pretty much figure it out.
Yeah.
Hopefully. But you find yourself in the other hemisphere. in
Yep.
a country like Indonesia, where I don't know a whole lot about, but I've had the opportunity to work with some folks, just a melting pot of cultures over there,
Yes.
much different than the melting pot of
Multiply.
cultures
Yeah.
that we have here. How did your listening and observation skills evolve by being dropped into perhaps such a polar opposite environment from where you grew up?
I had to listen louder than I ever did before over there. And I also had to find the right people to listen to because I was in an environment where a lot of our team was local, so they were Indonesian, but at the management and some more senior level positions, expats. And you could listen to expats who had totally different approaches, and you could tell who got it and who didn't get it as well. So you can easily be led astray if you listen to the wrong person. So I think it's a combination of do a listening tour to everyone, but get to know the local people as top priority because they're the ones who will teach you the most, whether you understand that at the onset or not. One great thing I did, I took a course before I moved over there just to understand a little bit more about the culture. And like you said, it is a melting pot of cultures. And I was living in Jakarta, which is, a huge, huge cosmopolitan city. So you have people from all over the country, you have all over the region and all over the world are just ascending on, this great city. So I had to kind of navigate not only like hyper local culture, but then the other like regional influences and all of that as well. And I think, you can't speak in generalities, but at least in my experience, I came into a culture where the people I worked with, they operate like family. And that was very different having previously worked either in the States or I did work in the UK at one point. I worked in the Netherlands as well. You came in, you did a job. Yes, you got along with your colleagues, but you left at the end of the day and you went home to your family. Whereas in Southeast Asia, no, like those people, they became part of your family and they wanted to hang out. They wanted to have lunch together. They wanted to have dinners together. They wanted to do things together. And that was so different for me. So until I caught on to that, I was on the outside and I didn't realize they were trying to pull me in because that's what they expected. The other thing, in a lot of Western societies, you want to be autonomous, right? You don't necessarily want to be told what to do by your boss. You get to a certain level, you want to have freedom to figure it out on your own. In a lot of Eastern cultures, that's the opposite. There's a lot of respect for the boss, no matter what age and what race and what gender. And so that took me a while because I am the type of person like, don't tell me what to do. I'm going to give me basic guidelines. I'll figure it out. And then you can tell me it's wrong after and we can do it together. But like, I need to take the first step. So unlearning personal preference in order to better serve my team was a huge, huge learning. And I think that was something I started to notice in my first month or two, but it wasn't until probably months 3, 4, 5 that I was able to pull back and change my ways because I was realizing, okay, this is not working. They want to be told what to do and how to do it. And then things got better from there once I figured that out. But yeah, it took a lot of trial and error, listening and learning, and a lot of listening.
Extremely important in such an international, cross-cultural, multi-cross-cultural
Yes.
example. Equally important, although the flame probably isn't burning as hot, but equally important domestically as
Yes.
leaders, that the line you just gave, unlearning your personal preference.
Yes.
If we want to get the most out of the people around us, we have to unlearn our personal preference, learn theirs, and cultivate the communication, the leadership, the bonding experiences that they need to get the most out of them. It's not what we want. It has to be built around what they want. So although yours is a white hot example that I can't directly relate to, it absolutely comes back to these other environments as well. And your comment about doing a listening tour, makes so much sense. And if you're new in a role, if you're new in a company, if you're new in an office, we could break it down onto whatever. If you're new in examples,
Yep.
my thought would be, and please, again, correct me on this, don't just do one listening tour, but continue to do listening tours, because often in the beginning, if people are just getting to know you, they might not open up. Or they might tell you what they think you want to hear. Yep. But the more you spend time with these different groups of people, the more, to steal an investigator phrase, ground truth will start to reveal itself. Yep. Because you'll have a series of observations to compare what you're being told from multiple people at different levels, different points of view. And the truth reveals.
Yes. And I think you just hit on it. What I wanted to add as well, don't keep it, if you're coming in at a management position, don't keep it at management level. You need to talk to everyone in different geographies across the country, different roles. Yes, get to know your team, but get to know the business and all the different roles and different levels, and start to build a network within as well. Don't stay insular in your own little bubble. That was a huge, huge key learning for me, that quite honestly, I was so focused on my team in the beginning. It took me a little while to then go beyond. And that's when things really started to come together.
Which is natural. Focus on our team first, and then hopefully build out after that. Even to take your word, the locals. The local can be a different person in a different company. Yes. And often they're not the management. The brightest example I'll have is I worked for a company. I went in, and the local, if you will, was the engineer, the maintenance person. He had been there in the same job for 20 years.
Yeah.
And his personality wasn't the friendliest, so he didn't have the best reputation. But not only did he know every little crack and wire in that building, he knew every person. And he knew them from an objective perspective, because he wasn't working with them within their teams. He had observations from the outside. Yeah. The more I realized that, he kind of earned his reputation as being a little bit grouchy, but his observations were spectacular.
Yes.
He became the relied upon local. So for you, especially going to the other side of the world, how did you determine who to listen to, who to seek out? Because I could probably quote any number of Disney movies. The person who appears the most friendly in the beginning could be the bad guy by Act 3.
Absolutely. And that happened to me. So you have to cast a wide enough net where you're not relying on one person. So it could be part of your listening tour. You just, form a connection with a certain person and ask them, say, hey, would you be willing to pick up the phone and chat, maybe in a week after I've been here, I'm going to have more questions. Give them the option to say yes or no, but do that with multiple people. Because then you can start to kind of cross-reference for yourself. Okay, this person said this, that didn't feel exactly right. This person said that, this other person said that. Okay, maybe I won't talk to this person as much anymore. I kind of would describe it as, when you're a child and you're starting a new school, or you're entering college, or whatever it is, and you have to make friends, right? How do you go about doing that? And sometimes the first person you meet is not going to be your friend in 6 months' time, because you just realize, we don't have that much in common, or it was convenient in the moment, but I've evolved, they've evolved, whatever. So you kind of have to do that in an international or domestic office setting, new job as well. Just kind of feel it out, find your people. And, sooner rather than later, you'll get a sense of, okay, who can I trust? Is the information lining up if I'm hearing it from different places? And then you can get a little bit more narrow from there. But I think that's the key in the beginning. You can't just focus on one person. And, even if they have the best intentions, you need to hear it from different sources, because also people see things differently as well. So you need different perspectives.
Cross those perspectives over each other, and then figure out where our perspective or our need lines up on top of them. Cast a wide enough net's a great point. I'm keeping an eye on the clock. I know you got a busy day. I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, of course.
There's at least a dozen questions I wanted to ask, and we haven't
we
gotten to.
We can do a part 2. So
yeah, I would love to. But
amazing.
As you reflect back on the process of writing the book, which led to the reflection on the
Yep.
first 10 years of your career, as we wrap this up, what would be the biggest learning lesson that we haven't discussed yet that you would love to leave everybody with?
I think that has to be that the power of reflection is just that. It's powerful. I always wanted to write a book. I thought it would be a historical fiction novel. Maybe that will come somewhere down the line. I never thought it would be what it is today, which was the collection of stories from my career laden with all these learnings. But I am so glad that's what it was. And that was what it is today, because it forced me to sit down. I started writing it in 2021. I didn't publish till early 25. So it was obviously a few years in a process. I moved a few times in between. And that forced me to really build my own self-awareness, understand my own story, and be able to shape the future I want to move into professionally as well. And I think reflection is a gift we can give ourselves that we don't pause enough to do. So whether that's, jotting down notes, whether, you don't have time for it and you only do it at the half year point or the end of the year point tied to the usual performance appraisal cycles, whatever it is, just make sure you're doing it and you're really doing it. Like do the work, as I said earlier, because it pays off so much in the end.
What a great way to bring it full circle. Do the work.
Do the work.
So for people who have enjoyed listening to you, your experiences, they want to learn more from you. They want to connect with you. They want to keep up to date with what you're doing.
Yep.
Where can they find your book? Where can they stay connected with you?
Yeah, so my website is a one-stop shop for all. I have an email address on there, and you can connect with me on LinkedIn and Instagram. You can also click on different links to buy the books, whether that be, an Amazon, a Barnes & Noble, pick your poison. But that website is my first and last name. So Dayna, Dayna, Adelman, Adelman.com.
And we will have all of those links directly. They don't have to go to Amazon or Barnes & Noble. They can get it right there. We'll put all the links in the show notes for everybody.
Perfect.
Dayna, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to be here today.
Yes.
I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you for taking the time to reflect, document your lessons so we can all learn from them and take a little bit more to share them with us directly today. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Michael. It was such a pleasure, and I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Me too. Stay safe. We'll talk to you again soon.
Sounds good. Bye.
Dayna, thank you so much for a great conversation. I really appreciate you sharing all your personal experiences, your family stories, the lessons that you've learned, and so many concepts that we can apply, whether we're early in our career, whether we're leading people who are early in their career, or even if we're in later stages of our career and continuing to look to learn and evolve how we communicate and interact every day. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. I loved how you talked about it's our responsibility to keep other people in the conversation. That was a fantastic point. I couldn't agree more. I also liked how you talked about sometimes the importance of unlearning our personal experiences. And I've got to go back and reiterate your point. We've got to listen louder than we speak. I thought that was a great point. Thank you for all that you shared today. And of course, thank you to everybody for being here for another week and listening to the show. We really appreciate you coming back. Please take just a second, like the show, subscribe to the show, share it, leave your feedback, leave your comments. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much. And while you're online, check out our sponsors. Head over to humantel.com and enter the code Inquisive25 for 25% off. The best in-class online training to recognize what people are likely thinking and feeling at any point in time by recognizing shifts in their facial expressions and nonverbal communication. I highly recommend the training. I've done it myself. It's over at humantel.com. For the professional interviewers, head over to certifiedinterviewer.com. That's where you can get all your questions answered about the International Association of Interviewers. What's it take to join? What are the training programs? What are the meeting schedules? What can you contribute to the association? How can you network? All your questions will be answered there. That's also where you can learn more about the Certified Forensic Interviewer designation. What's it take to qualify? How do you earn it? What can it mean for your career and more over at certifiedinterviewer.com. And finally, please head over to Inquisive.com to learn more about the programs that our clients ask us to facilitate for their senior leaders, sales teams, HR teams, and more when they are looking to apply the persuasive communication and strategic observation skills necessary to uncover the truth in all of their high-value conversations. We really appreciate you being here week after week. Thank you so very much. Please stay safe, take care of each other. We'll see you next time.